privilege to be here tonight to pay tribute to Bruce Lee. I feel humbled in the midst of so many great martial artists in this room. And I want to thank Linda for carrying on the Bruce Lee legacy. And to John Wilkes for an outstanding job he has done preserving that legacy and willing to share it with the rest of the world. And also to all of the instructors who had the privilege of learning under Bruce and carrying on Dick and Joe concepts. I want to thank all of them. As I look back to my 7th decade on this planet, I think of 3 people that has had the strongest influence on my life. The first person was Jesus Christ. Undoubtedly, Jesus Christ was the greatest martial artist in human history. He was the epitome of fighting without fighting. He could overcome evil forces with the most powerful force in the world, love. The second person who had the greatest influence on my life was my father. I didn't appreciate my father until I became a young adult. The turning point came when a fire destroyed the main street of Widener, Arkansas, a little town about 110 people. Our little grocery store and home burned to the ground. The next day, I went with my father to a makeshift post office that had set up. And one of the neighbors asked him, "Well, Chief, what are you going to do now?" And my father looked at the man straight in the face and said, "When life knocks you down, you get up." That's it. Define what my father was all about. His response to that man has made a deep impression on me since. When life knocks you down, you get up. The third person that had the most positive impact on my life, of course, was Bruce Lee. I met Bruce back around 1962 after one of Wally J's luau's. Jimmy Lee, whom I had been training with, told me a young man was coming to town and he was going to demonstrate at Wally J's luau. And he said, "You got to catch it back." And one of the things I remember about that little demonstration was Bruce invited anyone who wanted to come up to stop his front hand punching. And I remember a couple of big, burly football type players jumped onto the stage and tried to stop Bruce's front hand jab. Bruce would say, "Are you ready?" They would nod their head. And zip, out and in. And each time the big guys would be either too late or too soon. And just to make sure it was not an accident, Bruce would give them a second try blocking the punch. The same result. I was impressed. So Jimmy told me that a group of guys would be meeting at his home on Monday evening. So I drove from Vallejo, California to Oakland and met Bruce in person for the first time, thus beginning a friendship that lasted until his untimely death in 1973. There are a lot of stories I could share with you tonight about Bruce. It would take probably another hour or two. Instead, I would like to share with you the one thing that Bruce said to me that changed my life forever. By 1964, I had moved to Stockton, California to become the pastor of St. Mark's United Methodist Church. Bruce and Linda had moved down to Oakland where they stayed at Jimmy's house. I usually come in on Friday to train. After one of the Friday night classes, Bruce said to me, let's go slumming, which means he wanted to drop in and see what other karate schools were doing. So he and I drove over to San Francisco and visited Al Tracy's Kempo school. I knew Al back in the Sacramento days when he had a school and I had a class in Sacramento. When we walked into the studio, Al greeted me, but he didn't know Bruce. So Bruce walked right into the training room, the dojo, where the brown belts were training the advanced students, and he leaned against the wall and watched them. Al and I came in and we watched, and Bruce made a comment. I don't remember what he said, but one of the brown belts said, well, why don't you show us what you need? Of course, Bruce bounced onto the mat, shoe and all. And he tells the brown belt to throw a punch, and Bruce countered and trapped his hand, and the brown belt tried to wiggle out, and Bruce hit him with a double palm right in the chest, knocked him against the wall, and he bounced off the wall. And then Bruce says, well, blindfold me. Let's do it blindfolded. So, of course, he did, and he did the same thing, knocked the guy against the wall. So on the way back to Oakland, we discussed what he had done at the Tracy School. He talked about combat theories. And then he asked me, he said, why are you taking all those Kung Fu classes? I was training at both the Choi Li Fut School and the Silum School. I said, well, I'm looking for the ultimate. And Bruce let out a big laugh. He says, man, there ain't no ultimate. The ultimate is in you. And he hit me in the chest. And I said, wow. I said, what do you mean? He said, what you know in the way of boxing is a good start. Just add some kicks, add some throws, add some grappling techniques, and work on refinement, and you have a total system. It took me a while to let go of the old belief, the old crutches. And when I got around to letting go and started to train on my own, I realized the truth Bruce had imparted in me. It's frightening to be your own teacher. The only way you can find the cause of your own ignorance, as he said, is self-evaluation and total commitment to your own process for growth. It is easy to be an imitator. But when you spend all your time and energy on trying to be like somebody else, you're doing yourself a disfavor. You're denying yourself depth and substance. As I look back, I realize what Bruce imparted in me was not solely about physical combat. It was about life. I get a sense that what he said had martial arts implications, but the bottom line was it went beyond that. It went deeper. Anyone who can break through the boundaries of physical combat will understand that Jeet Kune Do has to do with handling life situations. And I got a glimpse of that when he said, I practice martial arts so I can knock the hell out of my fears and my insecurities. The impractical person will see the spiritual and mental dimensions of the Bruce Lee concept. It's easy to punch out an attack. It takes more than physical skill to overcome the loss of a loved one, terminal illness, facing death, divorce, and other adversities. What Bruce showed me and taught me was the need to develop inner strength and self-reliance. In an excellent article written in the September 1971 issue of Black Belt magazine titled, Liberate Yourself from Classical Karate, Bruce talked about confinement. He said, one cannot express himself fully when imprisoned by a confining style. Lacking boundaries, combat is always fresh, alive, and constantly changing. After going into details about Jeet Kune Do and how much different this approach is compared to the classical style, Bruce said, at this point you may ask, how do I gain this knowledge? That you have to find out all by yourself. You must accept the fact there is no help but self-help. For the same reason, I cannot tell you how to gain freedom, since freedom exists within you. It is my belief that the highest compliment we can pay to the memory of Bruce Lee is not to try to be a clone of Bruce, but rather take that which is good, which he has left to us, and discover the truth within. Thank you.